Well, today President Trump is heading to Michigan. He's going to be visiting a Ford motor plant there that is now making supplies to deal with the coronavirus pandemic. Last week, the president was in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and today's trip will mark the third trip to a key battleground state in about a month. As part of his official White House visit, it's expected that he will meet with local and national Black leaders before addressing workers at the Ford plant. So CBS News campaign reporters Nicole Sganga and Adam Brewster are joining us now to talk a little bit about this trip. Adam, I'm going to start with you. What can we expect from the president's visit?
Well, this is a return to Michigan for the president, a state that he won by a very narrow margin, less than 11,000 votes in 2016, one that he is hoping to carry again in the 2020 election. And when he visits this factory today, he'll likely talk about ventilators and the production that's been ramped up to build those ventilators. Also things like American manufacturing, returning supply chains to the United States, some of the things that he talks about frequently. But when he arrives in the state, he's landing in a state that is now facing two separate crises. Michigan has been hit incredibly hard by the coronavirus pandemic. It has one of the highest death rates per capita of any state due to the pandemic. In April, the state had its highest monthly unemployment rate that the state has ever recorded, going back to 1976. And on top of that, just this week, thousands of people in Midland, Michigan, a city in the middle of the state, have been displaced and had to evacuate due to historic flooding in the state. So he is landing in a state that is facing two separate crises at this time when they are already crunched for resources.
Nicole, let me go to you. President Trump has not held a traditional in-person campaign rally in months. There are some who have suggested that the coronavirus task force briefings, which the president essentially took over, were sort of mini campaign rallies. How are these official White House visits to these states, to some of these factories, in some ways resembling some of the campaign rallies the president has held in the past?
Well, Vlad, they certainly sound like campaign rallies, and the president typically takes the stage not to the Hail to the Chief anthem, but to Born in the USA. He often criticizes his political rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, calling him Sleepy Joe, and points out the press, usually at the back of the manufacturing plant. Of course, these White House official visits tend to look a little bit different. Folks are socially distanced in the audience. Typically, he is speaking to workers who are producing the PPE like he'll be doing today. But oftentimes, folks in the audience are still wearing Make America Great Again gear and hats. One thing we'll be looking for today, Vlad, though, is whether or not the president decides to wear a mask. At previous trips to Arizona and Pennsylvania to PPE plants, he did not. It is the policy of the Ford manufacturing plant he's visiting today for everyone to wear masks, as it is in UAW union facilities. The president thus far has said, we'll see.
So, Adam, I guess the question is, especially when visits like this is surrounded with such controversy associated with COVID-19, the mask wearing and all that, are these visits making a difference in battleground states for him? Are they improving his prospects?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. That payoff may come a couple of months from now, and it kind of depends on what he says and what he does, while he is there. I mentioned Michigan is also dealing with an issue up in the middle of the state of natural disaster, but it's a chance for him to get some face time and get coverage in the local press, in a way that he may not be able to otherwise. Again, the margin was so close in Michigan. In 2016, President Trump was the first Republican to win the state since 1988. It's one that both parties, are fiercely competing over. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, a Democrat, told me, Michigan is ground zero for this election. But it's tough to say whether there are certainly some business owners who may feel that, the president, they don't want him being there just yet. But it is a chance for him to get out there and to, put his message out there directly to people, get it more directly to people in the state. I will note a recent poll has shown, a poll that came out yesterday from the Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce, shows about 63% of Michiganders approve of the job Governor Whitmer has done handling the pandemic. 43% approve of the job President Trump has done.
And Nicole, today's White House visit also violates an executive's order suspending all non-essential in-person visits to manufacturing facilities in Michigan. What has been Governor Gretchen Whitmer's reason for not trying to at least reschedule the trip? And how is she handling mounting pressure for her response to the coronavirus pandemic?
Well, Governor Whitmer's office says that they're eager for the president to showcase Michigan's role in restarting the economy amid this coronavirus pandemic. You know, we should say that restrictions in the state of Michigan, their lockdown, have been strict in comparison to other states. But keep in mind, especially when you compare Michigan to other battleground states, they've suffered larger losses when it comes to the coronavirus, seventh in the nation per capita for coronavirus deaths. That data, according to Johns Hopkins University, and about a third of the Michigan labor force has submitted unemployment claims. So they've been hit hard. Now, Governor Whitmer has faced a lot of pressure, consistent protests in Lansing, Michigan, asking her to reopen the economy. She is facing a lawsuit from the Republican legislators in her state, and she is often criticized by both the president and Trump campaign officials. Senior advisor to the Trump campaign, Mercedes Schlapp, calling Michigan a nanny state just yesterday. But the governor is starting to loosen some of these restrictions. Businesses will begin to slowly reopen starting this weekend in northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula. She's also starting to allow groups of 10 and under to gather. So we're starting to see some of the economy, some of those lockdowns being lifted.
So, Adam, President Trump also went after Michigan's Secretary of State. Her name is Jocelyn Benson, for vowing to send out millions of absentee ballot applications, not the ballots, but the applications, so you can request a ballot. The president actually vowing to defund, to withhold funding from the state. This isn't the only state that's doing this at this time. How has the state and the Secretary of State responded to this? And can you talk a little bit about how other states are also sending out these applications?
Yeah, so Michigan changed its law in 2018. Overwhelmingly approved by voters, that allowed everyone in the state to be able to vote absentee without an excuse. So whether these applications were going out to voters or not, every registered voter in Michigan had the option to vote absentee or vote by mail if they wanted to. Now, sending out these applications just kind of puts, takes it a step further and, puts the paper into people's hands and, removes a step from that. Secretary Benson points out that some of her Republican colleagues in states like Georgia and Iowa have sent out absentee ballot request forms to voters as well. States have varied in who exactly they send it to, but it has been done by Republican secretaries of state. A Trump campaign official suggested that in Michigan, the Secretary of State's not allowed to send unsolicited absentee ballot applications. A constitutional expert I spoke with yesterday said that's not necessarily the case, and not really the case, not the case. And that when Michigan changed its law in 2018, it also amended the Constitution that gives Benson or the Secretary of State more broad authority to do what he or she sees fit to protect voting rights within the state. I should also note that RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel on Monday was asked about a lawsuit in Wisconsin that was looking at having a court require that state to send absentee ballot request forms to voters. And McDaniel said, I'm fine with sending absentee ballot request forms to people, not the ballots themselves, but the request forms. She said that she's fine with that as long as things like security and verification measures are in place, and said that she would want it to come from a state official, state legislatures, governors, secretaries of state, and not be something that a court was forcing a state to do. Of course, here in Michigan, this was Benson taking an action on her own, not something that was ordered by a court. Governor Whitmer has also criticized the threats from the president to withhold any federal funding over this issue.
All right, Adam, thank you very much. Nicole as well. We thank you both. Appreciate it, guys.